Hi everybody, Keir the Rugby Strength Coach here. Another video for you today, this time on functional training. And functional training is fucking bullshit. If you're one of those coaches or players or athletes who uses the term functional training, you're a terrible person and you need to go and sit on the naughty step for 5 minutes. And today we're going to talk about why that is a bad term to use. So to begin with, we're going to discuss what people tend to mean when they use the term functional training. And normally what they're inferring is that there are certain exercises which will not transfer to the field of play and will not improve physical performance. And there's exercises which are going to be effective if we put them into the program. And the exercises that people are describing when they use this term can vary from practitioner to practitioner. At the one end, you have reasonably sane people who refer to functional exercises as basic compound movements where we're moving with a non-fixed load. So for example, a barbell, dumbbell, kettlebell, power bag, anything like that. And we're moving with multiple joints at the same time, so it's a compound movement. At the other end, you can have some people that go really far with the concept and they'll start incorporating multiple planes of movement into the exercise at the same time. They may also start to use unstable surfaces in the belief that it's going to increase gains of speed, strength and power and transfer more effectively to the field of play. When they're talking about non-functional exercises, what they're generally referring to are exercises where we're only moving one joint at a time, so effectively an isolation exercise. They're talking about exercises where we might only be moving in one plane of movement at one time, and we might be talking about machines where we're using a fixed resistance. So why is the term functional training fucking bullshit? Well, the reason is, if you look in the dictionary, functional just means that something has an effect or a purpose, or its presence is merited through its effectiveness rather than attractiveness. Now, if you think about what we're doing in training, everything is a functional exercise. Every exercise that we employ throughout the program has an effect. If it didn't have an effect, it wouldn't be in the program. So it's kind of a misnomer. And really, the reasons that people give for classifying one exercise as functional or another as non-functional, they're rendered meaningless depending on what we're using exercise for, who we're using it with, and where we are in our training program. So if you follow my blog, you'll know that I've written before about the concept of transfer in relation to training age. We know from research that if you're a younger trainee, a younger athlete who's just taken up resistance training, you're going to see a good amount of transfer from traditional barbell lifts to higher speed, shorter contact time movements on the field of play like running, jumping, cutting and so on. However, we know that the longer that you train for and the more accommodated your body becomes to those traditional barbell lifts, eventually the transfer to the field of play is going to progressively slow down to zero. And in that case, we need to start employing exercises which share a higher degree of dynamic correspondence to the field of play, according to the criteria which have been outlined by Soviet sports scientists. And they include the range of movement, the contact time, the speed of movement, where within the range of movement that we produce our force, and the direction and magnitude of force. So if we're an experienced athlete and the traditional barbell lifts, the so-called functional exercises, have ceased to transfer to the field of play, and we're looking to raise speed, strength and power in position-specific movements on the field, those functional exercises might actually cease to be effective altogether. So they're actually, for our purposes, non-functional. But if we're dealing with a young athlete with a relatively low training age, it's going to be in our interest to utilize that barbell exercise, because not only are we going to increase on-field speed, strength and power, we're also going to lay a great foundation of strength to later use those more intense training methods down the line and not tap them out when the athlete is young and can still benefit from more general means. So that there is an example of a functional exercise which has been rendered completely ineffective depending on the individual state of the athlete or what we're training for. So now let's talk about how we can take a non-functional exercise and make that extremely functional for our needs and purposes. Let's imagine that we're in a team environment, and if you've been in a team environment and ever performed barbell back squats, you'll have seen a lot of different compensation patterns within that environment. Some people's knees cave in, some people rise up hips first, some people can't go low enough. And all of that stems from individual deficiencies in terms of mobility, stability, or motor patterning. Now in this instance, if we just take this so-called functional exercise of the barbell back squat and we perform it again and again and again, we may improve somewhat in terms of that mobility, stability, motor patterning, but likely what's going to happen is the weakest link is going to remain the weakest link, and we're always going to fall back to that compensation pattern and do what we do badly again and again and again. So in this instance, we need to target the weakest link within that chain, bring it up, and then put that individual piece back into the hole of the barbell back squat. So it might be that if your knees cave in, you might do some seated hip abduction, which a lot of people call the good girl, bad girl machine. If your hips rise up first, you might lack upper back tightness. So it might be that you're doing back extensions with plenty of spinal flexion extension. So that non-functional exercise that we've used there has actually improved our performance in a so-called functional exercise, which is then going to lay the foundation for other abilities and movement patterns down the road. So really the question of whether an exercise is effective or not depends on what's in front of you. The question that we need to ask is, what is the movement or physical ability that we're trying to raise with this training session? What are the exercise conditions which are going to stimulate our body to create those adaptations? And are those exercise conditions necessary or merited with the athlete that we are or that we have in front of us? The question that we need to ask is, what is the movement or physical ability that we're trying to raise with this training session? What are the exercise conditions which are going to stimulate our body to create those adaptations? And are those exercise conditions necessary or merited with the athlete that we are or that we have in front of us? If you can answer all three of those questions, then the exercises which you select, they're going to be functional regardless of whether they're compound or isolation movements, regardless of whether they're a free weight or a fixed resistance, and regardless of whether it's a stable surface or an unstable surface. So, functional training is fucking bullshit. Ask yourself those questions, and then you can get off the naughty step.